Welcome to Modig Unlabeled. We have started a podcast because we've been sharing some stories on social media about designers that we love and fashion movements, fashion theories, and they've just been starting some really, really good conversations. And we thought, why not expand it into a longer format, and why not include more people in it? There's so many different facets, so many different things to talk about. It is just really exciting to open up the whole world of vintage fashion and contemporary fashion, and we'll see where it goes. Just a little introduction. We are Modig. We are mother-daughter co-owners, and Lisa has been doing vintage fashion for over 3 decades. Lisa knows so much about vintage fashion that we thought we would just open up the conversation. And one of her favorite things to do is talk our ear off in the office all about different designers, different things in fashion. And we thought other people should be part of that conversation as well. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Katie.
What are we talking about for our very first podcast episode?
Well, we're going to start with one of our favorite designers, and that is Franco Moschino. And we have a very large Moschino collection that we had been saving because in 2020 we were asked to send some pieces to a museum exhibit, and they ended up not being able to do the exhibit, of course, because of COVID. And then also every year there would be something else. They couldn't find the space or the funding fell through. So we finally decided just to release the collection as it is. It's our own little mini museum.
And it's a special year because this year marks 30 years since he passed. And so we just thought, with everything aligning the way it did, why not just have this be something that we do on our own?
Yes, and he's really fun to talk about. He had a really great career, and he made a big impact for the few years that he was designing.
And he designed in the 80s.
He started Moschino in 1983, and then he launched his Cheap and Chic line in 1988.
Okay.
The year you were born.
The year I was born.
Yeah.
So then when did he start before that? Because he didn't just come out the gate with Moschino.
Right. No, he actually studied art. So he was going to be an illustrator. He wanted to be a painter. And he went to art school in Italy, and then he went to work for Versace as a sketcher. And it was Versace who convinced him, seeing his talent in sketching and seeing him work with the fabric, saying, you need to be a fashion designer. And that's when he left. He went to work for a company called Cadet for a while, and then he started his own label.
That's amazing, because I feel like that's such a supportive move to basically tell someone to become your competitor.
Yeah, and I think a lot of his influence carried through. They have a lot of the same philosophies in terms of what style means and everything, and I think he made a huge impact on Franco Moschino.
What were some of those fashion philosophies that they share? What does that even mean?
Well, I think the one that jumps out the most for me is the fact that they both really didn't believe that there was such a thing as good taste. So good taste, everybody kind of gets this kind of aesthetic in mind, and they think, oh, that's, the old money, that must be good taste, or this must. And basically, Franco Moschino compared good taste to food. So if you have taste in food, if you love sushi or you don't love sushi, if you love pizza but you don't love pizza, whatever it is, it's your taste. There's no such thing as good taste in food, really. And the same thing is true of fashion. Taste is whatever you like and whatever makes you feel good and whatever you wear. And they both had that philosophy.
It's interesting.
Yeah, because honestly, what is tacky? It's kind of funny.
Right. Who sets that rule?
Who does decide that rule? Because otherwise, a lot of designers would be considered tacky if you use that standard.
Yeah.
And I think his main philosophy, too, was that he always said he wasn't a fashion designer. He always said he was a painter or a creator or philosopher. And what he wanted to do was study human behavior. So he loved watching why people wear what they wear, why designers design what they design, and he wanted to come up with his own kind of interpretation. But he didn't believe that fashion was anything that he created. It was whatever the wearer would do with the piece that he designed. That was true fashion to him.
So more like the styling and how they put it together into
and how they made it their own
style.
Right. Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting too, because so many of our pieces, he used a lot of words and a lot of imagery and very specific symbols and things. And so much of it is either seems to be subtly or very explicitly mocking the actual fashion world.
Yes. He really did think that fashion was a trivial thing, and that anybody who made it the most important thing in their life was really not really living life. He wanted people to get involved in other causes and to make fashion just something you'd wear to be comfortable and feel good about yourself. And ironically, that's the paradox, is that he was making money off of all this. And the other big paradox was that people would go in wanting Moschino because it was in, which is entirely against what he was trying to express, which is you wear whatever you want, not what's in. So it was kind of an interesting dichotomy he found himself in.
Why do you think he designed clothes if it was such a conflicting thing for him? Why wasn't he just a painter?
I think he was humble. I think he knew he was a fashion designer. I think he was, and I think he enjoyed having fun. He wanted people to have fun with clothes. I think he wanted people to laugh and stop taking themselves so seriously. That really was the whole ethos, was don't take yourself so seriously. This should be fun. You should be enjoying yourself. He used to say that in Italy, they say if you're to be elegant or to be in style, it just means being comfortable with whatever you're doing and wearing. So if you're comfortable, you're in style. When my daughters were in middle school, I remember sitting each of you down and saying, if you're confident, no one will ever make fun of you. But if you act like you're nervous, I don't know if I should be wearing this, and then everybody will. It's just kind of the way life, people love confident people and comfortable people.
And you also said, if you act embarrassed of me, I will give you something to be embarrassed about.
I did say that, and I probably did that as well. And I think, too, his desire, I think he really was struggling with that conflict a lot during his career of, okay, I'm doing this anti-fashion movement and making a lot of money on it being a fashion designer. It was a whole bunch of paradoxes in there.
But also that's not far off from the art world.
Oh, yeah.
He was the first to come along as a designer who was critiquing the whole system. Nobody had really done that before.
Right. And Moschino definitely took his own experiences, his love of Italy, all of his passions, and put them in his fashion. So it's humor, it's wit, it's intellect. You know, they always say to be a good comedian, you have to be intelligent. Like really good comedians are very smart people. And I think it's true with using humor and anything else like fashion. You have to be smart to figure that out. And he did.
So what were some of his funniest things? What are the things to you that when you see it on his pieces, it makes you just like chuckle?
I love his Monopoly pants, the Moschinopoly. I love anything with olive oil that he did. And I really love his play on other designers, especially Chanel. And a lot of people misunderstood that. But when he was at Cadet, the company I told you he worked right alongside Karl Lagerfeld. They were actually friends. And so he really respected and loved Chanel's jackets. What he was trying to say to people with his version of those was, don't take yourself so seriously. Wear those jackets with denim or wear them this way. Or here, I'm going to show you how they can be worn. It was kind of a humorous, and I do love a lot of those. They're really funny.
And he got in trouble, didn't he, for those?
Well, he was sued because one of his ad campaigns had a TV in the background that had channel number 5 in the same Chanel number 5 font, and he was sued for that. Yeah. But he
Chanel
put the chains.
relentless.
Yeah, he put the chains in like Chanel did. He did a lot of Chanelish. Oh, and then the dinner suit, which they called the dinner suit, he then put on forks and spoons and knives, which we have that suit.
So the dinner suit was a suit made by Chanel.
Right. And he took that and turned it into a literal dinner suit.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
And then, of course, the one that you love so much is the survival jacket.
The survival jacket is amazing. Moschino died in 1994. So how many collections did he actually even have?
Well, I guess that would be 12. I don't even know if he did them every year. So I don't even think that's true. I just made that number up. I think because it's very hard. You know, we document all of our pieces, and it's really hard to document Moschino. And part of the reason is he sometimes would say, he didn't like being under that fashion god kind of thing. Like, okay, you have to have this many collections, this date right now. And he kind of rebelled against the whole system. And so I'd like to be able to find a website or someplace that had every single collection, and it's just impossible. I get a lot from reading a lot of old newspaper articles. I've gone through everything online possible, so it's very difficult.
And he died of an illness having to do with complications from AIDS.
Yes,
correct. And he was pretty young, wasn't he?
44, yeah.
Yeah, that's really tragic.
Yeah. And I think towards the end of his life, he started to kind of reevaluate a lot of his philosophies, and I think he started to really move away from what he had been doing in fashion. I think a lot of it had become I mean, I think a lot of fashion designers take themselves very seriously, and he didn't. And that was one of his really beautiful qualities, I think. There's a story about how after most fashion shows, a lot of people would rush the stage and go backstage to meet the designer. And Moschino, instead of allowing that to happen, he would beat the crowd to the lobby to actually meet the audience because he wanted to be with the customer. He didn't want to be this person in an ivory tower set apart because he really believed that the only people who could understand his parody and his wit were the people who couldn't afford his pieces, which was the irony in that. And one of the things that I think people have missed in Moschino, and I think you probably know this, Katie, because you've felt those pieces, is that they are beautifully tailored. And I think people didn't understand that he was an impeccable tailor. And he knew that in order for fun, silly clothes to be taken seriously and to be relevant, they have to be made well. And he understood history. So a lot of his things have historical components. They have a lot of Italian references because he was very loyal to Italy and but you have to know your stuff to be able to do that.
There's a jacket we have that I love because he used, that bric-a-brac? He used like massive bric-a-brac as the trim because it's like a silly, cheap, like crafty material. It's not something that Chanel would put on a jacket. And he made it the front and center piece in a very Chanel-esque tailored jacket, which I just think was so funny. But then you put that jacket on and it's a perfectly fitting jacket. It just has bric-a-brac on it, which is just great. Yeah. It's like if you get it, you get it. Moschino. It's like you have to have a really defined personal style that's very expressive, very fun, and that doesn't take itself too seriously, but doesn't want to sacrifice quality. You're not just wearing any old random goofy thing. You're wearing something that's making like a full statement, sometimes actually literally.
Well, and actually in order to make those fun clothes, he had to be a really keen observer of people and of behavior and of culture and everything. You have to really be aware of what's going on. You can't just like in your own head create something. And I think he definitely was paying attention to what was going on.
So what's the deal with Popeye and olive oil?
Well, I think he loved the idea of cartoons being on clothes. It's like this funny juxtaposition of this serious, highbrow kind of, it's called couture, but and then having a cartoon on it. Just that juxtaposition. I'm sure he probably loved Popeye. He loved Western, American West. He loved, like I said, all things Italian are just huge everywhere. A lot of things like flowers, and toward the end it became kind of more earth conscious, but in the beginning it was definitely a lot of fun, unexpected elements.
So towards the end, things started shifting. He started using a lot more earthy tones, a lot more earthy themes and symbols, and he even completely changed his label. We have some pieces from one of his last collections. And it is all about earth conscious sustainability. So what was that shift for him?
I don't really know what was going on in his mind at the time, but I think maybe facing what he was facing with AIDS and reevaluating purpose of life and why we're here. And he really became I think he always had been environmentally conscious, but he became more so. And so he started this Eco Couture line. And we have a suit from that line, which is really beautifully made, really nice. I think one time he made a faux fur coat, and the lining said, "Fur is worn by beautiful animals and ugly people." And that was, years before. So he had really strong feelings about the earth. Moschino once said that environmental concern is really the only true and honest fashion trend. And so being really concerned about your environment, the world, it just became really important to him. And I think he was going to start using really sustainable materials, and really he was probably researching different ways to do that.
Well, it's interesting because he probably was thinking about the legacy he was going to leave. And to end on that note is so interesting. It's so positive and so like forward thinking about what designers struggle to do even today. And this was in the early 90s.
Franco Moschino, toward the end of his life, created something called the Smile Campaign, and the proceeds were donated to children who had AIDS, which was really wonderful. I think he had really become I think he'd always been philanthropic, but I think his heart was really focused on making the world a better place in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, that's an incredible legacy.
Mm-hmm. And I think Moschino, Rosella Giardini was really a muse and a close friend of his. And so I think he really entrusted his company to her. And I think she did a great job. I mean, she really did. She really tried to carry a lot of his themes through. But after a while, you know, sometimes it's really hard when you don't have the original person, because that person's whole personality is wrapped up in what they do. And it's hard to keep it going. And styles change. And
who has been your favorite in the line of people that have taken over creative direction of Moschino?
Well, there have only been two. So Rosella Giardini and then Jeremy Scott. I love what Jeremy Scott did with Moschino. I think I had recently read that Rosella Giardini didn't really love it. And so that was surprising to me. But maybe it was because, again, to take over what a designer had done from his heart and then somebody else's heart, it's just different. He brought in a lot of Americana, a lot of American themes, and I think it was just different. But I think his heart was in the right place, and I think he was really trying. And I think he loved looking at the Moschino archives. A lot of vintage dealers that I've talked to have said he came to their booth at a fair just to see the pieces. So he was very involved in really respecting the house, which I really like.
And he did it while doing an interesting thing, I feel like, compared to Moschino's original, like Franco Moschino's original path, is he kind of did it by playing up the celebrity element more. I feel like he had a lot of celebrities who all of a sudden were all wearing only Moschino, which is interesting because I feel like that's not quite Franco's route. So what do you think that was? Do you think that was just more to get it in back in the public eye in a big way?
I think it's our culture today. I don't think we were as celebrity as obsessed in the 90s as we are now. And so now almost every brand wants a celebrity ambassador. And I don't think Franco Moschino would have really embraced that if it was available at the time. But I didn't know him. I wish I did. But I would say that doesn't really go along with everything he represented. But, you know, now it's almost a curse if you don't have someone. A lot of them, a lot of times it was natural, like with Patrick Kelly. Betty Davis loved Patrick Kelly and wore it. He didn't go after her and say, would you be my ambassador? She just happened to love it. And I think it's the same is true of Moschino. I remember the people that wore Moschino in the 90s. They were very, very confident people. And they stood out to me like, oh my gosh, that is so cool. Because it was just so different from anything I'd ever seen.
Did you wear Moschino in the 90s?
No, I couldn't afford Moschino. Even the cheap and chic. Cheap and chic is kind of a funny name for it because it was expensive. It was not reasonable stuff.
When I first saw the label cheap and chic, I assumed that was a full diffusion line because the word cheap is literally in it. So tell us more about the cheap and chic line.
I think Moschino used the term cheap and chic as another play on words, putting chic and cheap together at the same time. And he always said, it's not going to be chic unless it's made well. So you can use cheaper materials, and he did in the time, he used more rayons and acetate and stuff. And at that time, everybody was using only silk. And so that was a little bit forward thinking. And it was a ready-to-wear line. So it wasn't diffusion.
So his focus was more on making the tailoring perfect and less on using the highest end materials available.
Right. And
to keep cost at like a reasonable place.
Right. Yes. But still, and I think even in the press, they really didn't understand what he was trying to do. And so the cheap and chic line, even the name for them was confusing. And they didn't really understand it. And he wasn't just a jokester or prankster like they always called him. They called him like the court jester of Milan and all these different names. But he was really trying to make a statement and just to say to people, just enjoy life, like have fun. Wear what you want to wear, wear what makes you feel good and what makes you feel happy, and be confident in it. That's really it. And I do believe that Moschino's ready-to-wear cheap and chic line was made, if not better, at least as good as some of the ready-to-wear lines, some of the even couture lines today. It was beautifully made. Everything had lining. The lining was always a contrast or it had some type of a theme in itself. Everything has beautiful buttons. His buttons could be a museum in themselves. And so he put a lot of detail and care into his pieces, and it showed.
We did this with YSL a couple years ago where we released a large collection. And I think you and I both love working in this way because I think at heart we're more collectors than anything. And so gathering a body of work from a designer is really special because you start to see their personality and you start to see their values and you start to get a sense of who they are. And we've gotten estates before of designers, not to name any names, where we at the end of it didn't actually really like the designer that much. By the end, there just wasn't a good fit for us. And YSL is a really good fit for us, and Moschino is an excellent fit. We have so much fun collecting his pieces because they're just joyful and they don't take themselves too seriously, but they take tailoring very seriously. They take fashion seriously and they don't take the fashion world seriously. And that aligns with our values, basically, about fashion and even that part about his sustainability. That's why we do vintage fashion, is because we love beautiful things and we love self-expression. And also we love saving garments from the landfill.
Yeah, and I think, too, we both love humor and we really love... I think we've had fun going through these pieces and even just measuring them and looking at, first of all, Italians have really small hips, I got to say. All these Italian designers, watch out when you're buying those.
But look at just in general,
yes, please don't read signs.
Never read the size label.
Yes, especially Italian designers. But I think we find ourselves just kind of being in awe of him. And the part of me is just bittersweet because it's so sad that we lost him, and I would have loved to have seen what he would have done with that Eco Couture line. I think it would have been fabulous, and I think the world needed it at that time. Maybe he was way too far ahead of his time, because even now it's difficult to get people engaged. But the fact that he did, he taught people how to be elegant while still having fun. We've had so much fun getting ready for this release, and I think just discovering all of his little Easter eggs and the things that he tucked away. And I learned from you, Katie, that he hit his birthday in a lot of pieces, which I didn't even know.
He was so intentional I think it goes back to him being so intelligent with his humor and with his designs, because every number you see has a meaning and you have to kind of piece out what it is. There's Easter eggs everywhere. So we have a shirt that's a barcode, and the barcode numbers are his birthday. He hid his birthday all over the place in tons of his designs. You have to kind of look for it.
And I love his buttons. I think his buttons could be a whole podcast. I'm not kidding. And they're just so fascinating. And one of them has little push and pull buttons. And he's done olive oil buttons.
Faucets.
Yeah.
He did hot and cold as buttons. Mm-hmm. There's olive oil. He did little Western hats.
Buttons and linings. We could do a whole talk on buttons and linings.
We have such a simple black jacket that inside says which, like which on the broomstick. And we bought it for the lining, which is so silly because it's a beautiful black jacket, but no one sees the lining. No. But as you're wearing it, you're witchy.
Mm-hmm.
And even though, we talked about how it's hard to document Moschino because a lot of his shows weren't videoed or even photographed. You could find very limited documentation, but some of his linings have a big wreath and say the season and the year. Like he had a big tribute show, and it's not from the original show, it's from the tribute show if it says 1994 on it.
Yeah, and I think we have a piece from his original collection, his very first show for Cheap and Chic. And it's just fun, the way he played with linings and played with buttons and all the little trims. He made everything really special. And I would have liked him. I think we would have liked Franco Moschino. And that's kind of like some designers, we love their work and we go, not so sure I'd like them. But I think we would have liked him.
Definitely. He's one you don't want to separate the art from the artist with that.
Right, exactly.
What are some of the ways that you think Moschino drew on that art background of his? Because that's such a unique place for designers to come out of.
I think hugely. I think a lot of the pieces, the one I'm wearing today, I think, he used his art. He collaborated with Roy.
And for those not in a visual medium, Lisa's wearing a sweatshirt with a Western paper doll, but it's a red fitted paper doll dress and a cowboy hat, and the back and pearls, and the back shows a naked paper doll, which is which is really fun.
And it's a very old Moschino piece. But I think people make fun of my accent online because I don't pronounce things correctly. So how do you pronounce the artist that he collaborated with?
Lichtenstein?
Yes, Rory Lichtenstein. So that jacket is really famous, and we have that. And the way but the nice thing about that jacket, I was just noticing the other day, is the way the face appears and how perfectly aligned it is and how difficult that must have been to tailor. Really appreciate that. But I think he used art in everything he did. Everything has some type of artistic eye. And again, it's his keen observation skills.
And taking a 2D medium and turning it into a 3D object isn't easy.
No.
He did that in such cool ways.
Yeah.
I know I have a piece in mind that we don't have in our collection that I want really, really badly. Do you have one?
I do. I wonder if it's the same.
I wonder if it's the same. Should we say it at the same time?
Okay. The cow skirt. Yeah.
I mean,
funny.
it is.
We didn't even plan that.
It is the coolest. We did not
It
plan
is.
that.
No, I love that skirt.
That is a little bit of the holy grail.
Yeah. So if anybody has one, I'll give you $1 for it.
If we didn't have the survival jacket, I'd say the survival jacket.
Yes.
But
yes, we have it. Yeah.
he played a lot with the West and a lot with farm culture in general. He's got a lot of like farm animals on things, on barns and clouds and things, imagery you just think of when you think about, Western farm life.
That you don't expect in couture or in upper level.
Yes, that's never in couture. So he's got this maxi skirt that's red, I believe, with a big cow wrapping around the entire thing. And it's just so hilarious and cool. And I would actually wear it.
I would too. I would wear that skirt.
Yeah.
It's
It's
like a
very
jean
cool.
jacket and just wear it out.
Yeah, just casually.
Yeah.
And then fancy and then every day and maybe to sleep in as well.
Exactly. So let's find it.
Okay.
Thank you so much for listening to this very first podcast episode of Modig Unlabeled. We have been working in the world of vintage clothing for so long. We love to have a place to talk about all things fashion, our favorite designers, and maybe even a little behind the scenes of this wild world of luxury vintage fashion. It is nerve-wracking and exciting to begin to include all of you out there in our conversations that we have daily here at Modig. We have found so many kindred spirits over the years at vintage trade shows, museum shows, costume departments of movie and TV shows, and just vintage shops in general. I just know there's so many more of you out there. We have so many big things planned for the podcast this year, so many fashion topics we're passionate about, insightful interviews, and deep dives into the lives of designers we love. You can watch this episode on YouTube at Modig Unlabeled, and we are on all socials at Shop Modig. I'll leave it here with the words of Moschino himself. Good taste doesn't exist. It is our taste. We have to be proud of it. So go out, be brave, confident, and proud of your unique taste.